being able to have this opportunity to talk about the self-care series book that I wrote. It was a concept that actually came about because of people transitioning from COVID, or a lot of my clients were presenting with depression, anxiety, or just really struggling with being able to incorporate self-care. And it's something that I enjoy trying to find ways to give visual, tangible interventions or tools to kind of help them be able to figure things out. And the reality is that people may have their own counselor or life coach or person that they go to that they love talking to. Whereas for me, I don't want to take people from that. So I want to say, here's your tool that you can use with your person. And this could be something to help people to feel more empowered to being able to incorporate self-care. And so time budgeting 101 was a concept that I thought about. It was something that, yes, can mirror time management, but it's really being intentional about how can you incorporate self-care. And interestingly, we would think that's an easy concept, right? But in all honesty, if you're like me, even like today, having to commute in, having to try to fit in time for maybe just to work out, or I need to eat, or I have to prep for the day, it's already been like 5 hours or 6 hours that's gone away. And so then I'm like, well, how am I supposed to find this time to meditate? Or how can I find this time to be able to stop and pause and put myself first when everybody's asking for things or I have to do things? Well, in all reality, the goal is that we can't reduce the amount of expectations that we have in our day-to-day, which I always put out there that there's 24 hours in a day and 7 days a week. It doesn't change. The calendar hasn't moved, the hours, the moon, the sun, it's literally consistently always like that. And so to me, we can't get rid of that concept. So how can we make it work for us? And so that's where I was like, okay, well, let's really try to budget our time more effectively. And so with that, it's just really trying to give people an idea to think about, where is their time going? I always put out a statement too that when we are driving, we always think about how much gas we're using, or when we go and purchase something, we always think about how much money is being reduced from our bank account, but we never realize how much we are giving ourselves to other people. Just having to smile, just having to sit with somebody, just having to talk to somebody, that's taking away from us, which can make us feel drained or exhausted. And we can feel like we're just not our best. And so with that, I just was trying to find ways, how can we pour back into ourselves and fill ourselves back up to where we can feel more empowered and encouraged to do what we want to do. And so hence, that's kind of where the time budgeting self-care came in. I do want to kind of maybe get people's, thoughts or ideas first, or I can even kind of share like a, portion from the book that makes sense. I really want to figure out like what makes sense. I've gotten different feedback where some people like me to share because I'm a visual learner. I love to see things to kind of make sense of stuff, or some people have it from that auditory standpoint where they want to hear it. But I'm really kind of curious as far as like, do people feel like it's easy for them to incorporate self-care? I see smiles, at least for the people I can see. And so I'm curious, maybe for the people who have, the cameras on, to maybe acknowledge. Some people are crying. So maybe that's another way. But yes, what are some reactions that I'm seeing?
I don't have time for self-care, but I always hope I will next week.
Right. Like it's going to happen one of these days, right? Or I'm going to have it, somebody else is going to give it to me, or tell me I can do this. I actually want to go a little deeper with that to find out like what usually are the obstacles that may keep you from, is it because of work or is it because of something else?
It just seems like there's always something. Every week you start with like fresh intentions and clean slate and a clean page on your agenda, I feel like. And like my husband got COVID 2 weeks ago. So that threw out my self-care 2 weeks ago, right? Because it was like quarantine and not get sick in my own home. And then
Right.
there, and it's kind of feel, I'm noticing that there's like every week there's something, whether it's COVID or not. It's just, I have to be really disciplined and not let those, whatever those hiccups that come get in the way.
Oh man, I appreciate you just kind of just saying like things come up, but I also heard something too where you're saying I need to be more disciplined. I'm not sure if it's always about being more disciplined. I think it's about how can we maybe be intentional or have more support, because sometimes it's other people who can help us. Like it would be nice if our jobs could be more thoughtful of our self-care, right? If they gave us more time away. But I appreciate you saying I'm going to take ownership on what I need to be thinking about, but it's also what are other ways and people can help support us, because it's not just us that has to be about self-care. Yes, Maria.
And I don't know if this is anyone else's experience, but it certainly is mine that it is always the first of the things to be eliminated when you're making the priority list. Those self-care things for me tend to be the first things to go if there's a competing priority.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's that concept of like, what's the easiest way to try to navigate a busy schedule when sometimes you have a deadline to adhere to, or there's something you just can't give up because it needs to happen. But I think there's that piece about how can we also kind of incorporate. And so I do want to share something because I appreciate what people are even putting out there, and just give an example. So in this book, I put a color-coded concept to kind of help people to start maybe budgeting. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand how the camera is working. But just looking at this concept that I put in different color codes to kind of help people understand, like, where is your time going? So like blue is the amount of hours that you may have in regards to, sleeping, because we're supposed to have 7 hours of sleep. Some people don't always do that. I can even look into my partner who doesn't always have 7 hours. But then we get into, red or orange. Orange is supposed to be when we have, lunchtime. Green is getting into the concept, and I'm going backwards. Green is where we're getting into maybe like working out, or even spending time with friends. And then like pink could also be a way to, whereas we're trying to, have some meditation. And then purple could be when we're actually looking at scrolling through social media, if you're like me. Or maybe people are just trying to talk to somebody on the phone. Well, the concept is that, looking at it, there's a key in the book that says, okay, how much time do you have that you're using for sleep? How much time are you putting in to actually have lunch or even breakfast? What times do you have for work? Because if many people, it's Monday through Friday, it's always consistent. It's usually at least 9 hours. If we want to do exercise, maybe we can bank it for an hour. And then maybe we can look at as far as screen time. And so we really want to use a tool, which is, and show you that I also put in a blank one, because you'll get to be able to write it in and actually look at your days, looking at, Monday through Saturday, where are you at in regards to a 24-hour clock? Because I'm really wanting to kind of use this as a concept, like you're budgeting or balancing your checkbook, wanting to balance your self-care. How are you incorporating your day-to-day? When you try to figure out that I know I have at least 8 or 9 hours a day that I work, I have to travel for 2 hours, you can budget in how much time you're actually using throughout the day, to where you can maybe try to reallocate where you can kind of incorporate time for maybe exercising, where you can kind of do some meditation, where you can actually find time to maybe talk to a loved one, maybe look for a hug. The goal is that we want to balance out, where are we putting our time? So if you can budget in that time and actually plan in, you can start to prep for the week. So when people are saying, well, it's the first that it's going, or it's just being taken away because I got to take care of my loved one. Well, we can try to budget for the week, maybe on the Sunday, and determine here's where I want to put in time that I want to exercise, or times that I want to actually do some meditation, or I can go for a walk. And you can block it in and protect it, just like you protect your time that you have for a meeting. Like, we protect all that because people will look at where is an opening on your schedule, and they'll just put meetings on. And you're like, wait, I do not want to do that right now. I want to protect it. Well, if you can try to plant in time that is built for you, you can use it as like, nope, I'm not free that time. Here's where I am free. Look at all these other openings. And then that could be a potential way for you to be able to figure out, okay, I am going to be more intentional about trying to put that in. So I wanted to kind of point that out and just kind of think about, does that make sense? I'm curious too about how people even think about budgeting their self-care, because some people be like, that's more work. Just having to do it. Like for me, trying to meal prep, that's like more work. But then it can be put into practice as, oh my gosh, it did save me time. But I'm wondering what other people are thinking.
I will say I really appreciate the book, and also the nature of how you're asking us to consider that time and budgeting that time is also a part of our values and what we're giving ourselves grace to have time
Oh my
for.
gosh. Yeah.
Right. And so for you to kind of normalize this idea of like, there are things that we can't control, like we're going to have to sleep, we're going to have to work, and that's going to take up a certain amount of time. But what you value with the rest of your time is something we can control and we can budget and manage. And so I first and foremost just appreciate the format, and yes, and the visuals. I'm seeing that in the chat here, because I think it's a great reminder for folks to give space for what you can do. Right. I think sometimes we look at self-care as a luxury, and we don't always give ourselves that space. And I know that's definitely something for me sometimes, is I try to reward myself instead of intentionally giving myself that time all the time. And then there's certain things like I value, like moving my body. If I have to get up at 6 a.m., that's what I'm doing, because I know at 6 a.m. I can do that. So moving my body is a value. That's something I will not compromise, right? So I appreciate you showing us kind of how to format that and organize that, so that I can always keep that in mind. When I say to myself, I don't have the time, as you said, is not changing. It's about how I'm making the time around that.
Yeah. And, I think too, the other piece about even this particular book that I created, it was really about how to reduce the amount of thought process that has to go into the concept, because I am thinking about the busy schedule, or even thinking about how my schedule is very busy. Because people will ask me all the time, like, how are you doing all the things you're doing? Well, because I am thinking about all the different self-care pieces where I intentionally do not schedule an 8 a.m. So when Dr. Hill said 6 a.m. work, I said, no, I will only do that if maybe have to be somewhere, necessarily I can't, get out of it. But I know myself, I am not a morning person. That is my truth. And I will take onus and say, if I'm not going to do it at 8, then I will also have a late meeting, which is fine, because I work better at nighttime. And I think that's the piece about even with self-care is, having the courage to just be your authentic self, being able to say, this is what I want to do for me. It's not for the person next to me, to the left of me, or even the person who says they do it so well. They're so good at self-care. Well, that's great. But your way is how you need to do it. And I think that's the other piece about self-care, or even from a standpoint of putting yourself first. The goal with this is also for people to think about themselves and what makes sense for them. Because if you're having to come up with something that somebody else feels, oh, this is what I need to do, we're not being realistic. It's kind of the same example of, you feel like you have $50,000 in the bank. In reality, you only make like 20,000, and then you're trying to spend and buy a $150,000 item. You don't have the money. Like, you have to think about, what is it that you have that's available? And when we are more true to ourselves, we may be okay with saying, you know what, I'm going to end this meeting or appointment 15 minutes early because I know I need to take a walk, or I need to go to the restroom, versus trying to just do back-to-back meetings, because that doesn't work for me. Or I know that I need to take a day off, and it's going to be okay because the stuff is still going to be there. Or I can, my thing is, I used to always be the yes person. I would always agree to everything. And that could be another thing about self-care, is that we always agree very quickly and we just say, yes, I'm going to do it, versus being able to say, you know what, can I think about that first? Or can I get back to you on that? That is a good way for it allows your mind to pause and really think about, do I have the time to do that? And then be okay with, you know what, this is not for me. This is for, you know what I'm saying? This is for you. And so even though you think it's okay, it doesn't mean this, I have to make it be okay. And that, I think, is also another piece about having an opportunity to maybe just do this assessment, which I would say writing this down to figure out where your time is. You start to realize, okay, what are the obstacles that are keeping me from being able to do what I need to do for me to do, you know, better. And I think that's the other element that I was able to help people to realize, is that sometimes we're saying too much or we're doing too much that has nothing to do with what we desire and are passionate about. And then we're constantly drained, you know what I'm saying, by the end of the day. I know there's different things in chat and I was trying not to miss those moments. Can't remember what was shared. I know Christina said something like she blindly says yes all the time.
I'm seeing some things about just really appreciating the visuals, being able to see the schedule fill up. The guided book is very important as a tool. Some points about sometimes it's easier, again, I appreciate this, it's easier to schedule things like going to the gym versus time for meditation. So just getting some favorable feedback about the book, but also some just real points about some things are harder than others to schedule.
Yeah, which I think that's the other piece, right? I created a checklist too, because that was another thing. And I'm just giving you a visual. You can always check it out a little bit later, but I created a checklist where I called it the Life Works Care List, because sometimes you can't think of what are things that I can put in as a practice. And so the one hot item that I always like to put out first is, can you reduce your screen time? And I put out the screen time is because our cell phones, you know, just having our cell phones in the front of our face, or just having our computer monitors in our face on a daily for the amount that we do, that blue light does impact our ability to relax and calm. And so if we do that all day, and then we do that even into the nighttime with our TVs, people struggle with being able to fall asleep because of that blue light. And so it's important to see if you can reduce the amount of screen time that you have, even if it's like 5% maybe one day, or, you know, start at 5 and then break it up to about 20%. It can make a world of a difference when you're not always on. I don't know if anybody's ever had the reaction where they think they hear the buzzing of their phone in the background. We're like, wait, it was not my phone. Oh my goodness. I'm conditioned classically, you know, but it is like, we're used to that vibration or that ding or something. And so we react that we don't know how to just sit still, which is something I am not really good at. I do not meditate really well because it is hard for me to pause. And so that's why I try to do more exercising. But I think considering, you know, reducing, you know, screen time, it's pulling out something else too. Like sometimes putting like a 10-minute, you know, break. I always try to encourage people to get up and walk away from their desk as a way to shift your mind, because if you go from one thing to the next, your mind is not able to stop, process what it's retaining, then store it, and then go on to the next. So you're just constantly being inundated with stuff. And so that's why it's really good to just maybe take like a 10-minute, even if you can't do 10, maybe just 5, and just be able to kind of regroup. And so these are just things to keep in the back of your mind. But I do have actually another workbook. I didn't bring it, but I'm going to add it in. As far as boundaries is another piece that you can incorporate that's part of your self-care. So when you are able to find ways to keep things separate, you know, work is work and then personal is personal, you can kind of really keep it separate, because if not, people try to pull you in so many different directions, and then it's really hard to be able to decipher, where do I put my energy? And so boundaries is another key, you know, way to be able to help you be able to say, how can I put myself first? I think the other piece that I wanted to add to that I have actually included in here. So the self-care workbook, how you want to phrase it, intervention strategy, was also initiated because I received my certification as an integrative, mental health professional. And that means I wanted to look at alternative methods to help improve individuals with their mental health, physical well-being, just from a holistic standpoint. And so thinking about alternative methods is that, yes, we can take medication, or we can try to find other ways to help us improve ourselves. And so that's where I really learned about like aromatherapy, and then also learned about herbal supplements. And so that was another piece to where you can be really good with self-care, but you need adaptogens. And I'm using the term adaptogens specifically because that is a terminology that was something I learned about through this certification, is that adaptogens helps you adapt to your stress. So we need these particular types of methodologies to help us basically combat the amount of stress that we're being impacted with. And so aromatherapy has been around for, millions, centuries, forever. And same thing as herbal, supplements. And so when we combine, any type of alternative method like aromatherapy, stretching, which is also the physical well-being. If you're also thinking about meditation and relaxing your mind, if you're looking at all three components, you can be able to start incorporating more of the self-care that you're wanting to do, because you're able to have the foundation to be able to stop and think. Because if you're, and I share this too, whereas when I was getting my doctorate, I developed sciatica. Dr. Hill knows about it. It was just like the worst thing in the world, but it was because of stress. I wasn't incorporating my self-care. I wasn't thinking about my mind. I wasn't thinking about what was going on. And I didn't realize how anxious and stressed I was, that my body literally said, we're about to shut you down and you're about to experience the most pain you've ever felt. And I didn't realize how much my body and my mind were linked together, that once the stress went away or the anxiety went away, all of a sudden my pain subsided. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh. And so that took me again through this concept about we're all interconnected in so many ways that we really have to be mindful of what's happening. So if many of you may be sitting here and thinking and engaging, but you could be experiencing physical ailments. You could be experiencing emotional, mental ailments. No one will know because they're invisible a lot of times. And so that's a key element that we will sometimes show up when we are really not at our best. And I'm always very advocate about, I don't want to ignore the stuff that I can't see. I don't want to sit here and think about this is what they may need when we're not looking at everything. And so that's why I was really big on trying to figure out how we can incorporate self-care, how we can think about how is our mind and our body functioning together, what we can do to help empower people. Because like I said, I don't discount medication. I don't discount, the medical field. I just say that a lot of times we have to find out long-term lifestyle changes so that we can be more empowered for ourselves, because sometimes we just focus on just the symptoms versus what's really going on around us. Because if we're having relationship concerns, if we're having toxic work environments, if we're having issues with our finances, or we're experiencing interactions with travel time, or we just don't have a safe place to stay, we're not going to ever be able to engage in self-care. We're going to be like, oh my gosh, okay, sure, that sounds good for me to meditate, but I need to figure out how I'm going to pay my bills. And that's that's a realistic concept. And that's my piece about, I understand that self-care is important, but I also understand we have to think about every component. And so if we have different morsels or strategies to look at all elements, they can work together. But the key piece is we got to figure out what it is. And so that's where time budgeting comes into, like, what's happening? What's the big picture on what's happening in your day-to-day? because the other piece that I will say, I am very, thoughtful in how I ask questions, because a lot of times people will not necessarily think something is impacting them until they start writing it out. Still, they start putting it down on paper. And still, you start asking questions, because when you get into the deep information of, well, why are you not able to sleep? Why are you not able to turn your phone off? You start to learn a little bit more about yourself or another person that you're talking to. So this comes in so many different ways and how you can understand and make sense about self-care. So I'm going to give you all of that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wayball, just introducing the book and how to use it. I think I really appreciate kind of seeing the excerpt there. I'm seeing some more things in the chat, but I also want to turn everyone's attention. I did put a link, an Amazon link, to where you can get the book. So if you're interested in getting Dr. Wayball's book, it is available on Amazon. It is not $100 like some of these textbooks are. I saw that Kindle, you can get it for free $99. So I love a good free item.
Yes.
So that's very cool. So if you're interested, and again, I've reviewed the book. Dr. Wayball has given me a copy to look at, and it is so user friendly. So as someone who's actually seen the pages and looked at everything, it just has been so exciting to see something that is tangible and practical and pretty easy to move through. I think even when you look at how people can maybe use this in an app, sometimes those digital apps and features make this even more complicated than it needs to be. So it was so refreshing for me personally to see this in a chart, to be able to kind of map out, okay, what does my calendars look like when I look at my Adler calendar versus my private practice calendar, and really being able to see where in some cases I have more time than I thought. It may be on this certain day, or it may be at this certain time, but this was so helpful as a tool to kind of be able to see that. So again, I thank you for welcoming yourself and welcoming your brilliance in this book into the space. So again, if you're interested, please click that link, go find it. Amazon's pretty good at delivering stuff when they want to within a few days. So you guys can get started right away. All right. I definitely want to open the floor for more questions and comments. I know there's folks who left things in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself and elaborate on what you said, or you have other questions or comments, please take this time right now to talk to our author. You got her here.
Right. Yes, Maria. I'm sorry.
So you said that you originally created it to assist your clients, and I'm wondering what the feedback and results have been with clients.
No, I appreciate that too. And that's that's always a piece to whereas they will originally will say, yes, this is what I need, and this is what I'll do. And so we will do it. I think the challenge is what has already been shared is that intentionality. And so how I do is I always reiterate and bring it up and bring it back, or figure out other ways to kind of strategize with them. And so, like I was mentioning before, it's a lifestyle change. And I also am a person that I will be realistic whenever implementing something new, because many people will assume that if they don't do it, then they have failed. And I don't want to encourage people to be like, oh my gosh, I tried something and then I don't want to ever do it again. I'm always big on stating the fact that it takes 21 days to make a habit or 21 days to break a habit. And many people have been on this earth more than 20 plus years, that you will not be able to just change something in like 10 days if you've been doing it for 20 years. And so what I have been doing, just to kind of answer your question again, is just to say being consistent and having to also encourage and give other ways that are really specific to them. So I will adapt it specific to even their personality, saying that, okay, if you may not be able to maybe jot down and journal, well, have you ever tried audio journaling where you just talk into your phone? Or I might say, well, if you can't turn your phone off, was there a way that maybe you can put it on do not disturb, so then it is shut off, but at least it will turn back on automatically without you having to think about it and remember to turn it back on. So it's really just trying to empower and encourage them to be specific to their, own needs.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will actually add to, because it made me think about, I am an innovator. I'm always thinking of stuff, and I'm always thinking of what does a person need, which I will say that it is a series, so there's going to be, more, but in the meantime, I actually put in and created, like I was mentioning, a boundaries workbook. So I did I did create another workbook that is also added to. So if somebody's like really struggling with being able to say no, then I'll incorporate boundaries as another piece. But then it goes back to, what other things can I give? And so I did start a newsletter. So I started that in June as another way to actually give people ways to help reiterate the importance of, self-care. And so that's why I started the Year of You. And so I've been doing that, and then also doing social media and having people to find out. So I'm doing a 30-day self-care challenge right now. And I've had people try to incorporate and participate in it to also be reminded about self-care. And so that's been a way to help people get information from other people. Yes, I see Alexandra. Yeah.
Thank you. This has been really, really helpful. I'm a student up in the Vancouver campus, and it's I'm actually American, and I lived in Chicago for 5 years, so it's exciting to connect with the other Chicagoans. But
yes,
the other side is the Canadian Adler student. Yeah. And I will say, it's interesting living here in Vancouver because it's West Coast, right? It's West Coast. It's a little crunchy, Canadian, and we speak a lot about self-care pretty casually here. But when it comes to the actual implementation, I'm learning, as a student, my most frazzled days are my Adler days, because I want to just get as much in as I can, right? I want to jump on every lunch and learn. I want to quick catch that speaker. I want to talk to that classmate, that professor, and it's kind of funny because I find myself again, we preach self-care a lot, and I'm I will have time for that after I graduate, but not right now, because right now I'm a student and I need to absorb as much as I can because this is a short time, and I'm wondering if this book that you've written just seems so paramount to teaching good habits early, especially for student clinicians who are learning how to set up their boundaries and how to read their own internal cues and your own interoception of how much I have left in my tank. And I'm just wondering, it makes so much sense to me. We have our 2 professional development courses here, and I'm just wondering I'll mention it to my professor, because I just feel this would be a million times more useful than, for example, we're reading a book right now, but it's all about the American medical system. So a lot of it doesn't apply to the Canadian clinic here, but we could replace it with this, and that would be awesome.
Yes.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
No, and I appreciate that's the other piece, even being in this format, is, being a counselor educator. It's so many domains that we are always passionate about wanting to, do. And that's a piece that I'm always thinking about. I mean, even with the fact that, I started at Adler, I was the director of training, and now into as being the program director. And so having those different lenses also helps me even as a practitioner. So having a private practice, I will have clients that are counselors too. So I have a few that I talk with. So it's so many overlaps that I do think about, even some of the concepts I bring, even teaching seminar classes or professional development is definitely the key piece about how can we push this forward, which is hence why even doing the 30-day self-care challenge, trying to prioritize people's mindset, kind of like when you see one thing, all of a sudden you're I've never seen that before, but then you see it every day, from that point on, because we're trying to trigger our minds to pay attention to things that we may not really be thinking about. And so if we can ignite students to realize that you are in the role as being a provider to support individuals to gain self-care, but if you're not practicing it, how can you be there to be able to help other people? And I'm a big person always paying attention to compassion fatigue, because there's times where if I'm noticing I need a day. Like this past Friday, I was like, I need a day. I cannot, cannot right now manage and focus because I knew the tank was low. And so that's why I needed to step back and kind of focus. And those are things that we have to be able to pay attention to, because sometimes we will do things in error or hurt someone, hurt ourselves if we're not paying attention to how our bodies are running. And self-care is that piece about self-awareness and really trying to prioritize so that we can be our best selves. Because we're not supposed to be just running ragged. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. Even if we're saying we decided to be clinicians, it doesn't mean that we're supposed to just not think about ourselves. It's important to put ourselves first as well. I appreciate that. And I would love to be able to talk more about that too. Other pieces.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you say to the person, especially because again, in your book, you kind of reference this in the about the book, in a digital world where people are having a hard time walking away from the computer, walking away from the email, saying things like, well, I just don't have the time. So you've got this kind of blockage that's happening in folks' ability to move through maybe the book or move through their own motivations for self-care. What do you say to those people who are, I just don't have it, or I can't walk away?
You know, and it's not even just with the digital, it's just in general, what I'm even just hearing is when people say I can't, that to me is like, ooh, I will want to just dig in and be like, okay, why not? That's my thing. Okay, you can't, why not? Because in all reality, there's a reason to why someone is saying they can't. And it could be, and this is what I will also say, and I forget who, so I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they mentioned that it's easier to jump in and take care of someone else than it is for themselves. Because to take care of myself just seems more exhausting. So no, but I will jump in and will just spend hours just, taking care of somebody else, but I won't do it for myself. So it goes back to that same element. Are we intentionally avoiding something because we are not ready to face what the reality may be? Because if you're similar to me, I know there's times where I will have moments where I might pause, and then all of a sudden I start pause, and then I start thinking, and then I start feeling, and then I'm like, oh, I don't like this feeling. And so then I start like, let's just go walk and move over there. Like, let's just go somewhere else. Let's avoid this feeling. Because usually people will stay busy because they don't want to feel the feeling, or they don't want to think about the thought. And so we will do things to protect ourselves. And by far, whenever you're working with me or as a professor, as a counselor, as a friend, whomever, I will always say, I'm not going to take away what's been working for you just right off. The goal is we got to incorporate as you start to learn and gain awareness. And so the expectation is we do things out of habit, either to protect ourselves, to, care for ourselves, or it's just because this is what we've been taught by our parents, our loved one. And so it has been working. It's just, if you start to see that you're not able to sleep, or you're not able to do your work, and you're starting to say this is impacting me, that's when I say, okay, well, maybe we should reevaluate and we should start looking at stuff, because a lot of times can't could mean something else. And so I will always ask for more information, because again, sometimes people do need to protect themselves, and we don't want them to feel like they just are just at a loss, and they'll never want to open up. That's the other piece. I'm always concerned about wanting to take away what's been working, because then it starts putting them in a position where they're like, wow, I'll never say that to anybody else, because now I feel ashamed, or now I feel like, something's wrong with me. When just because you can't engage in self-care just because you can't does not mean that there's something wrong with you. I think that's the other piece. They're like, I'm so bad at it, there's something wrong with me. No, my thing is about always saying, what can we do to help you if you're feeling like I want to make a change? I always go into the fact that if you feel like nothing's wrong, then just keep doing it. But if you're like, I want to change something, well, let's start to do something different. But by far, transformation, I always love, this is my theme song. I'll always like to say transformation is the most painful process. Just like think of a butterfly changing into, like a caterpillar changing into a butterfly. Transformation is the most painful process, but the end result is beautiful. It's just part of the process. We have to transform, which means to change, but ultimately we become a new person. And so that's what, self-care is really about, is really trying to transform yourself and to create a new lifestyle, which will have everlasting, effects on you. As you can see, I get really excited about this. And so I want to keep talking about it. It's that piece about where I always say that I always want to help someone feel that they're being heard or they have the tools, because sometimes people feel like they're by themselves, and that's, not a good feeling.
We have a few more minutes. I don't know if other folks have questions or comments for our author.
I actually have a comment. I just wanted to say I really appreciate Dr. Wade Ball for creating the book for all of us that actually need self-care and actually want to learn how to sit back and do this for ourselves. And I just want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're getting lots of hearts.
I
don't
know.
know if you can see them all,
it.
but they're great.
I love it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have any recommendations to, because this fall I'm in my first year, so I'll be starting my clinical internship. And then we have classes, and I'm cutting down on work hours, but I'm worried if I'll be able to really do much to prevent burning out by the end of the semester, just because of all the stuff we have to do.
Oh, yes. And I love that question, because it's a factor about, the unknown. And I think that's a lot of times where we start to feel apprehensive, or some people procrastinate, which I got to find a way to even figure out and share. But I remember TEDx had a great video on procrastination. And I'm not trying to say that's what you're doing, Jasmine. You're not procrastinating, but I'm putting it out there just to put it in the stance that procrastination is not a bad thing. Procrastination is also a way that we protect ourselves, that sometimes we start to feel a certain feeling that makes us feel like I don't want to do it. So then we try to, avoid. And so I'm wanting to say we have to find a way so that people don't start to want to procrastinate. And so one thought is to start to think about, what would your fall semester look like? And so that gets into that time budgeting piece. And it could be a peer, it could be your professor, it could be me, it could be, the director of training, someone to sit down with you and say, let's look at your fall, let's look at your spring, let's look at your summer, because clinical training is very consistent in actuality. And you can actually have your classes even figured out for a whole year. And so we can kind of budget where your time is. You can kind of figure out what days you may be the most busiest, to then also be able to figure out, okay, where can we find time for you? And then also think about, okay, you're not going to be working as much. What can we do to also compensate the fact that you may not be working? So then maybe trying to figure out other ways to try to help budget you, so you don't feel pressure to now find oh no, I'm gonna have to go back to work, or I need to increase my time, or figure out something to compensate. And that's where it gets into the place of, we really want to look at it from a big picture lens, and not have you feel the pressure of having to rush. Because I think that's the other piece, to whereas we start to maybe take it slow, and then all of a sudden we start to speed up really fast, and then we get really tired and burned out, and then we don't want to do it anymore. And so if we can really plan it out for a year, you can proactively figure out how to maximize your time, so that you will not feel like you're having to be at your site for 10 hours, when maybe you can spread it out, or even prorate it in the fall, and then change it out in the springtime. because everybody who goes through training will get their hours done. And I think sometimes people feel like that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it's like, yes, it will. But I think it's really helpful to have someone sit down with you and really try to give you strategies on how to plan it for like a whole year, and even involve friends, family. Do you have that one person who's really good at, organizing? Have someone who help you with meal prepping. Have someone help you with being able to incorporate some type of meditation. I had some students when I was a site supervisor who would actually go and meditate and do yoga twice a week while they were doing their internship. I'm like, that is the greatest thing in the world. And they were like, yes, we need this for our minds and we need to be able to relax. And they had their buddy to always help them be held accountable so that they would go and do this meditation so that they had that moment to just be able to pause. So reach out and, see if somebody can be that advocate to, really support you. Yeah, you're welcome. And I was just thinking about, go ahead, Francine.
Hi, this is absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Erica. I just wanted to share a quick story. Meditation is key, and I'm really glad that you encourage your students to do that. I remember maybe about a year ago when Camille Williamson was our director over the center. We started one of our meetings where she wanted us to just do a quick 5-minute meditation. And because we were all so busy with prepping for a symposium and everything, we could not do it. Now, I love meditation, and I've done it before with Dr. Bahian, and, and it was just really something we all needed, and she could clearly see it. But we were trying to close our eyes, but thinking of everything. Oh, got to do this, got to do that. So meditation is key. It is really key. And if you could just quiet your mind for just a moment, things will be so much better in the long run. It helps you focus and, get yourself together. But, when we did it the second time, we were able to do much better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you actually had me think about, it goes back to, again, the tools. What tools do you have? What person do you have? Who can help you be accountable? And actually, one of my students gave me this app idea. They told me about, it's called How We Feel. And I'm sorry, it's only for iOS. I apologize for any Android users. But if you're an iOS user, How We Feel is the best app ever to me, just because I love to help people track how they're feeling, what moods they are, but it also has videos to help with meditation. It also has prompts to kind of have you journal your thoughts when you say this is how you're feeling. So there's just so many levels to it. Like by far, Calm is great. So as a student, you get that free, yes, use the free, Calm app component, but then also How We Feel. If you like being able to do, I couldn't think of it right now, just blinked out of my mind. Shine changed the headspace. I'm sorry. Shine used to be Shine, but now it's Headspace because I guess they're competing with Calm. But those are great apps. And then if you have a Peloton bike, you can also use that as well. But I really always like to encourage people to monitor how they're feeling, their moods. So that could be a way to also give you sources while you're going through your training so you can be more in tune with how you're feeling. Because that's the other piece in regards to just self-care, is that we have to pay attention to how we're feeling, because our moods can tell us that maybe I might need to sleep, or maybe I might need a hug, or maybe I might need to eat. Or maybe I just need to just not go to work, and I think that's the other piece. I tell my clients all the time, your sick days can be mental health days. So use your sick days that you have paid for when you're working. Use them. Do not feel like it. Even when I tell my clients, when you meet with me, take that hour towards your time versus it using for your lunch. Because a lot of times it will use it as your lunch break, but then they don't have a lunch break. And then I'm like, no, they should be separate. It's a sick time. You are seeing a doctor. So use that time to meet with your person. And then you have your lunch break. So you have that time to yourself. And so that's a piece about just remembering that mental health is something that we have to be paying attention to. And so use your benefits that you get when you are, working full time. I know part time, you don't get those same benefits, but you can still say, I'm taking a mental health day and I'm not working, because we have to be able to recharge and regenerate. Yes. Encourage those benefits. And yes, the Calm app is free. We get that.
Yes,
As
thank
our
you.
students and employees.
Thank you, Christina Gunther, for that reminder, because those fingers were moving faster than mine. I totally forgot about that for a while. But oh my gosh, you have access to that, students.
Mhm.
You are paying so much money and you have all these student fees. This is part of the fees. You better get in there.
Right,
Get in there and
right.
get this stuff for yourself. I love
Right.
the Calm. I've been using it for years. Before it had commercials and stuff, like I was using the Calm app. I had my clients using it. They owe me some money. Shoot, I've been promoting them for a while.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they have good stuff on there, especially reducing stress, anxiety. It's a great, and actually for clinicians or counselors in training that use it for 10 minutes before you start with meeting with your client. So then they have a pause before they start their minute, because they may be rushing from a meeting just to come see you. So use that Calm app for 5 minutes and then start your session. There's a lot of things that I think we forget about, that it's okay to incorporate tools as part of your skill set as a clinician. You're not just there to just listen. You can, but it's also, as for me, I'm always there to empower and give people those everlasting, strategies so they can do it on their own.
Oh, we thank you again, Dr. Wayball, for your time, for all of your insights, sharing the book with us. As I mentioned before, the link to the book is in the chat. We want to thank you all for participating and bringing such rich questions and dialogue to our just another great Black author series. I want to shout out some of the amazing committee members here that are on the DI committee. We have Maria Fritz, Christina Gunther, Francine Reed here. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else from the committee. Oh, Mariah's here. Yes. So we've got a bunch of awesome committee members here. We just want to thank you for being a part of this year with us, learning with us, hopefully starting some self-care practices with us. Before we adjourn, Dr. Wayball, you mentioned like the 30-day challenge. Is there anything that you want to share as far as how folks can get more information about the books that are coming out or about the challenges you have?
Yes. I am on 2 different platforms. So follow me on LinkedIn. I post stuff via LinkedIn. You can follow me or comments. But I also started Instagram. I know some people don't have an Instagram, but if you do, it's at Dr. Erica and you. And so with that, you click on my bio and you will get access to a way to subscribe to my newsletter. So right now the newsletter is about self-awareness. The next installation will be about unmasking imposter phenomenon, because that's really about my dissertation. Just a spinoff from it. It's not my dissertation, but it's a spinoff from there. And you'll be able to get more insights to where you can participate in the 30-day self-care challenge. All I ask is people just, add Dr. Erica and you and say hashtag 30-day self-care challenge. So I encourage you to follow, comments, and again, participate.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for participating, everyone. And we wish you well and a great week. Happy Monday. That doesn't get your Monday going. I don't know what does.
Right. Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.